Welcome. Would you like to introduce your name, course, year, and university?
So hi, my name's Cheyenne Waters, and I'm in my final year at Bournemouth University, and I study media production.
Could you tell us your hometown?
Yeah, so I'm from London originally, and then studying down south.
What course are you currently studying in your final year?
I'm currently studying media production, which is a BA honours.
Why did you choose your course?
So the reason I chose my course is I come from a background of doing lots of film studies. I did kind of film studies A levels, and I also did the BFI Film Academy. So kind of throughout my time at school, my knowledge was very film focused. However, I wanted to become more adaptive and learn how to do different skills. So I decided to do media production, and media production at Bournemouth is one of the best in the country. So by doing more broad spectrum stuff, I've learned to do audio skills as well as graphic designs, which I wouldn't have been able to do on directly a film course.
You've now in your third or fourth year of your course.
Fourth year.
What have you thought about your course so far?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I think depending on what aspect of, production you want to go into, there's different parts of the units which, will be preferable to others. So I currently am going into being a producer, and there's a couple of units which really have stood out to me that, we did a kind of client and audience unit where you work directly with a client and you build relationships to produce a product for them. And that was, one of the best units I've done at university, purely for the standpoint it gives you exposure to clients, as well as working with a brief and making sure that you can manage your teams correctly. So for each kind of skill that you have within the media production degree, there's usually a unit which will specialize in that, whether it's web design, where you look at graphics and stuff like that, which will be useful for someone who wants to go into graphic design, or the film units if you want to, particularly be a cameraman or a DOP.
Okay. You mentioned that your course is 4 years, implying you had a placement year.
Yes.
In this placement year, did you take the placement year?
Yes. So I did originally it was supposed to be a year placement at the Walt Disney Company, working as a production management intern in the animation team. So kind of in that job, it consists of assisting the team, like learning to do budgets and legal documents and stuff like that, learning kind of the vital skills needed to be a producer. However, it's specified within the animation world for kind of, the Disney channels as well as Disney Plus. But due to COVID, it was extended to about a year and a half. So I got to get more exposure within the company. But yeah, a lot of it was working from home. But yeah, I took the optional kind of fourth year. However, on our course, it's compulsory to do 4 weeks, but a year is optional.
What advice would you give to students who are looking to take a placement year?
So the advice I'd give to them is kind of start looking early, kind of come July the year before, I'd start looking at placements that, you think will be suited to you or companies, and kind of looking at their Glassdoor recommendations. A lot of the big companies, if you want to go for a big corporation, a lot of their internships kind of end, the deadlines are October, November. So you want to be kind of on top of what you want to apply for and make sure you've got your CV and your applications out there. I'd also suggest kind of taking as much voluntary work as possible. The more stuff you have on the CV, the more attractive it can be to lots of companies, as it shows that you've got commitment to stuff. But if you don't want to go for a big corporation, I wouldn't stress too much. I know lots of friends, who didn't get their placements until kind of May. I know it can be very scary, but don't be disheartened because there's options out there. Some of my friends went off to Amsterdam to do a placement that's relevant. So, you have the whole world's your oyster. So don't be disheartened. But yeah, a lot of the big companies kind of get your experience in early because you need to be applying in October.
Did you come from a sixth form or college background?
I came from sixth form.
What A levels did you take in sixth form?
I did economics, psychology, film, drama, and extended project.
Did any of these subjects help you with your course?
Yeah, so I'd say the kind of unit or the subjects which helped a lot was actually economics helped quite a lot because you kind of look at political stuff as well as like looking at the environment. So it works quite well with media production in terms of, units where I want to explore lots of stuff. Like I remember in first year, I did a unit on kind of, world politics with film and kind of explore that side of stuff. And I think, I did film studies. So that was, of course, really useful in terms of learning how to write for, being able to write essays in that manner, as well as being able to actually do the physical production with it. So, as much as, my course is now more kind of like a college course than sixth form course. I think the skills learned at sixth form in terms of essay writing bind very well compared to doing a straight production course at school, because you won't know necessarily the academic stuff. But both are equally as important kind of moving forward towards the degree.
And what do you think the best A-levels/subjects are for your course?
The best A-level subjects for media production would be media, film, and kind of anything that you can find that's remotely creative but also allows for some academic knowledge. So that could be ICT, because you have the fundamentals to know how to use the software. It's just changing them and catering them into different ways. And stuff like psychology can be really useful, as that helps with a lot of the kind of literature reviews and stuff like that, and you're used to reading big theses and being able to write essays and kind of do the academic reference side of stuff.
Okay. If we now go into the university you're currently studying at, could you remind us of that university?
So I study at Bournemouth University.
If we go into the best and worst things about studying at Bournemouth University, starting off with the worst.
So the worst thing about studying at Bournemouth is, I guess, mainly currently with everything being online, one of the best things about Bournemouth is kind of, where the campuses are and, the kind of things available to you in Bournemouth. So experiencing it now with an opportunity of kind of, not like being off campus and stuff like that, it's a very different university experience, as you lose a lot of the kind of feeling of family and stuff that you get at the university. And yeah, the kind of other thing that is the worst is probably the accommodation in first year, just because a lot of the time there's lots of building work going on.
Okay. And if we go into the best things about studying at Bournemouth University.
So the best things about studying at Bournemouth is the location, is it's really, kind of, especially in first year, you're very central to a lot of things. As well as that, the campus has had a massive regeneration in the last kind of 10 years. There's a lot of development that's been put involved, and there's a lot more studios that have kind of been built recently. So in terms of kind of having the structure of new buildings and stuff like that, it is very much up there compared to a lot of other universities where the accommodation is much older, or the campuses need re-renovation and stuff like that.
If we now go into the accommodation, you previously said that it was one of the worst things about studying at Bournemouth. Where did you live in your first year?
So in my first year, I lived at Cranbourne House, which now there's a lot more accommodations which have come up, which are a lot nicer. But at the time, it was one of the best ones to go for within the kind of mid-range price range, but also the one to have the most fun. But however, now a lot of the accommodations, there's a lot more fancy accommodations that are redone up and are very expensive. So one of the kind of issues with the accommodation is that they're ridiculously expensive compared to a lot of other universities, but then you get a much better location than you would get in some places.
In your opinion, what kind of vibe was Cranbourne House? Was it more party or was it more study?
It was definitely party. We're originally coming to university, that was my aim. My aim was to kind of come and enjoy myself and make as many friends as possible, and that the degree was a plus. And I think that's the good thing about being an accommodation like Cranbourne, and the good thing about Bournemouth University is your first year doesn't count, in the terms of you have time to make friends, you have time to socialize and get used to people on your course, before in second year, when you have to settle down and go towards your grades, you have a sense of what to expect and stuff like that, but you've also had the time to kind of build relationships.
Now, if we're going to your second year, did you stay in accommodation or did you move into a house?
In second year, I lived in a house in the kind of student area. Yeah.
And what was it like going from an accommodation to a house?
So originally, I was going to drop out of university after first year. And so I wasn't looking at accommodation to live with any of my friends. So actually me finding my second year house was very random. And I kind of, lived with strangers that I didn't expect to live with. But actually it was much easier because it felt more like a family, in the sense of course, in halls, you all have kitchens and living rooms and stuff like that. But they're kind of at the end of the corridor. Whereas within the kind of setup of a normal home, it's a lot more homely. You have a lot more functional things to do together. And if you wanted to have a couple of people over in the garden, you're more likely to build relationships with people, whereas if you're in halls, you can't do that. and the only option is, you kind of only see people that you're friends with, rather than having a big group of, everyone's friends mixed together. So it was quite hard to adjust, in the sense that I didn't know anyone I was living with before I lived with them. But after about a week, it was absolutely fine.
And your third year, you were on placement?
Yes. So on my third year, I moved back to London so I could work at Disney. So Disney is in West London and I live in North London. So it was just commuting back and forwards every day rather than paying for accommodation or rent. But yeah, I was just back at home.
And now your final year?
And yes, and in my final year, I'm in another student house with the people I lived with in second year, which is really nice, as it kind of, binds everyone together for the.
Is there a reason you decided to go into a house and not staying in accommodation, aside from obviously your first year decisions?
Yeah, so the way the kind of structure is at Bournemouth University for my age group, 2 years below, it is slightly different. You could only live in halls if you were in first year for my second year. Sorry, when I was in second year, you could only live in halls if you were in first year. So the gradual progression was to move to a home. And after living at home for a year and also experiencing kind of both after second year, the people I wanted to live with, we come to the conclusion, and with the pandemic and everything, that it was important to be in a house so that we could have access to a garden and have everything kind of self-contained. But now Bournemouth has sort of progressed more and opened more halls to give options for third years to live in halls, especially if you want to be in town. And I think, if that option was available to me, potentially that's something I would have looked at. But because the kind of general progression for people my year and older was that, first halls are specifically for first years.
As a media student, you've done a good amount of freelancing.
Yes.
For students who are at university or are about to go to university, could you give them a description of what it was like to do your freelancing in various places?
Yeah, so freelancing is literally one of my favorite things I've ever done. So kind of before I came to university, I did the BFI Film Academy. And through the BFI Film Academy, I got to meet loads of people within the industry, and they kind of offered me lots of experiences.
Could you describe what that is for students?
Yeah, so the Film Academy is a kind of scheme for people aged between 17 and 19 to do basically a vocational course in film production. Within that, it's very competitive to get into, but once you get into it, opens loads of doors for you. And it kind of, gives you an insight to the jobs available within the film industry and how to access them. And it's kind of open to anyone, and they have lots of schemes throughout the whole country. And towards the end of the project, you kind of create something that you show at the BFI. So it's an opportunity to have your first screening in a big cinema, but also meet directors in your local area and work with people in the community to produce different projects. So I kind of used the stuff I'd done at the BFI to meet lots of contacts within producing. And they were able to introduce me to lots of different people. And then they recommended me to this scheme called Just Runners, which I'd recommend for anyone at university if you're trying to get your foot in the door in the advertising world. So I had this scheme called Just Runners, where it's a scheme to stop nepotism within the media industry. And the aim is to get people from different backgrounds to kind of, find their first in to the industry. And they teach you how to be a runner on set and stuff like that. So through them, I was able to work on loads of productions for lots of different production companies, for clients such as, McDonald's and EE, and for music videos for artists such as Sam Smith and stuff like that. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of meet lots of people within the industry and also get paid work doing it. So, freelancing is great because you work with different crews all the time and you can build your portfolio and learn about different job roles. I've learned about so many different things that I didn't know existed, like a DIT, who are kind of people who basically do live editing on set and kind of compare the two images to make sure that everything's aligned. And these are job roles I'd never heard of until, I'd actually experienced working on set. So, trying to get yourself out there and experiencing as much as possible means that when you come to university, you can focus your interests into job roles that you want to work on and talk to your lecturers about the best way to get to them.
Okay. You now have a job lined up as a wild brain spark. Mm-hmm. If I said that wrong, apologies. As a production coordinator. Yeah. For students who are interested in things such as that, could you tell them the process you had to do to get there and what they should expect what you expect obviously be doing once you reach there?
Yeah. So in terms of production, you need to learn skills on kind of budgeting and be able to read legal documentation, as well as kind of the organization of teams and crews. Production is sort of suited to someone who likes to work with a team and is quite extroverted, but also has good management skills. And the kind of way into going to be a coordinator. So I worked for over a year as the animation intern at Disney. Now, then usually you would then the next progression become a production assistant. So within the production assistant role, you would do a kind of a little step up from an internship. You learn a couple more skills, but you're still kind of as an assistant. And after being assistant, you would then move up to being a coordinator. And within a coordinator role, you know, instead of assisting on budget, you make the budgets. You know, it's that one step up, and it's like the one step below a production manager. So it's this kind of in-between level where you kind of learn how to manage productions, but don't have the full responsibility of the whole production. So, you know, usually you would take the pipeline of doing an assistant after doing an internship. However, you know, within my case, I've skipped being an assistant and gone straight to being a coordinator. So there's options to do so if, you know, you feel like your skill sets are relevant and the company has trust and believes in you and wants to kind of educate you.
What general advice would you give to students about to study at university?
So the advice the main advice I'd give, and I think this is important for all aspects of your life, is to have a good work-life balance. I think it's important that you don't, you know, do work every single day, all day, every day, because you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to find lack of enjoyment in your course. I think it's important to be able to enjoy yourself whilst at university, because when you go into the real world, you know, it's the one opportunity in your life that you get to kind of be free for the first time living away from home. So I just kind of recommend having a study routine, whether, you know, for me personally, I don't work the best in the middle of the day. So I would work between 7 a.m. and 12, and then I'll work between 5 and like 12 again, depending on kind of, you know, the mood I'm in that day, as that's what work schedule works best for me. And it's when I'm most productive. So I just recommend to students to find something that works for them and not to, you know, force themselves to work 9 to 5 every day. If that's not something that suits you, don't do it. You know, you need to find a way that works for you in terms of your study. Otherwise you'll lose enjoyment. And don't leave things to the last minute, because you will regret it. And, you know, kind of another advice as well is, you know, second year is very important, and more important than you think it is when you come to final year. Because I know, you know, with myself and other people I know, you could, you know, finish second year with 68%, but that then means in your final year, you need to get 74%, rather than if you've done a little bit better in second year, you take the pressure of final year when it's a lot harder and there's a lot more elements to kind of deal with. So you really do push yourself in second year, as it just takes a lot of pressure off your final year at university.
What advice would you give to students about to study at Bournemouth University?
So yeah, my advice for people studying at Bournemouth is to kind of make sure you go through all of the criteria of everything you're going to be covering, and make sure you look at the units and find out what's kind of suited to you. Once you find out the units that you think will best be suited to you, make sure that, you know, you go out of there and you contact your lecturers and you have a look at the brief of your lecturers about kind of, you know, what they specialize in. And once you find out what they specialize in, you can approach different lecturers and ask them about different stuff. You know, I know some lecturers who specialize in TV and some in radio, and they have experience at companies like BBC and stuff like that. So, you know, make sure once you find your interest and find things you're catered to reach out to your lecturers, because you will find out that they have a wealth of knowledge and they've done lots of experience within the industry, and they can advise you on lots of different things.
And finally, what advice would you give to students about to study your course at university?
So yeah, people about to study media production, generally, or at Bournemouth?
Generally.
Yeah, so if you're going to study media production, make sure you have a real look at actually what the criteria is. When I was applying for universities, I was applying for film production, media production, and then kind of media studies, as well as sort of you know, media and anthropology. Make sure you kind of have a look at everything that it breaks down into each element. Bournemouth University is great because it combines academic stuff as well as actually having practical knowledge. But you might find that a course is better suited for you under the same sort of, you know, branding. However, the name might be slightly different, because if you like anthropology and you like learning about life, then you might find a media and anthropology course more insightful and more interesting, or you might find a media comms course more interesting, depending on your interest. So if you're kind of looking in to go to the field of media production or just media in general, make sure you have a breakdown of all of the units and everything they cover, because you might find that something you're interested in, you're actually interested in something slightly different, but the names are very, very similar.
You chose going to university over an apprenticeship / going right into work. What path you to make this choice?
So actually, originally I was going to go down the apprenticeship route, as I was offered one. However, I came to the conclusion that I would be beneficial if I got a degree, as being someone from an ethnic minority, no one can ever take my degree away from me. And that was, the simple fact of it. And that's why it was something that I really wanted to do and have for myself. However, I think it's important. I think workplace experience as well is just as important as your university degree. When originally I was going to drop out in first year, I had a discussion with my parents about it, and they discussed, kind of me working freelance as well as doing my university degree. And that was really hard, as it meant, that I was working really hard, but also studying a lot. But actually, it's the most important thing that I've ever done, in the sense that I was able to build myself within the industry, but also continue to do my degree. And that way you get hand in hand kind of the literature side of stuff and learning how to do stuff in an educational way, but also physically getting to learn how to do stuff. So, I'm a big advocate for people doing apprenticeship, but also your degree. And I think if you can do two hand in hand, then you're onto a winner and you'll be successful in whatever you put your mind to.
At this point, I let students have what I like to call a free-for-all. You can say what you want about what you like. You can give advice. You can say something smart. You can say something dumb. Literally, the floor is yours.
Floor. I'm not very witty. Yeah, I mean, I guess my, token of advice is just to push yourself. You never know what's around the corner. You never know who you're going to meet. People you meet at university can become your best friends, your allies, your work colleagues. You never know where you're going to be within 5 to 10 years time. So make sure that you take advantage of, all of the experiences you have available to you, as you never know what's around the corner, and just enjoy the moments that you have, because it only happens once.
Okay.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'm plugged in.
Amazing. Thank you.